Today I want to share with you from the 6th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. This is part of the center or the heart of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It begins, chapter 6 does, with teaching about how do you practice your piety? How do you develop your spiritual life and your relationship with God? And Jesus talks about three fundamental spiritual practices. And those practices are giving of our financial resources, fasting, and prayer. It's where we find what we call the Lord's Prayer in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 6. But after those three fundamental disciplines of giving and fasting and praying, Jesus then talks about where your treasure is. And some people, their treasure is all here on earth, and it's in all the material stuff they can have and all the things they can possess. And Jesus directs our attention in another place. He tells us in verses 19 to 21 not to build up treasures for ourselves on earth, because everything we have on earth will disappear. Have you ever had food in your pantry and gone into your pantry and gotten something out, and all of a sudden there was a little moth that came out, one of those pantry moths, and you're like, oh, there goes that bag of rice or that bag of flour or whatever it is. Moths do consume things, and it all goes away. Jesus says, don't build up treasure for yourself where rust, it just does its role of corrosion. And some of us have driven cars long enough that there was plenty of rust and that we finally had to get rid of it. Jesus says anything that's material, it's not worth treasuring. But build up treasures for yourselves in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And those are our verses for today, verses 20 and 21. And I've experienced all those things. Moths eating food and putting holes in clothes that then had to be tossed, couldn't even be given away. Rust eating away at cars or a basketball hoop. And I've even had the case when I was in high school of coming home and came in on someone who was stealing and robbing our house. So I've literally experienced all of those things, and maybe you have too. But Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And notice he doesn't say it the other way. It's not where your heart is, that's where your treasure will be. It's where your treasure is, your heart will follow. And that's why it's so important what, and I would say even more importantly, who you treasure in life. Because what you treasure, your heart will follow. And we want to treasure people who will be with us always, even in our hearts and minds and memories, even when they're not physically with us. The things of the kingdom of heaven, that will be with us always. Because all that you really can take with you when your time on this earth is over is everything that you've given away. And that includes all the material things you've given away, but even more importantly, all the love that you've given.